that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. And we're telling you about what's happened in the last week in energy, the last week being the week ending, what does this end? Today.
Today, yeah.
Or yesterday, actually. It's July, it's August 5th that it ends.
We got it down as the 6th. So
yeah.
we'll live with that.
Well, the show is recorded on the 6th. Anyway, this is the news of the world and so forth, energy and climate change, the world of energy and the change of climate.
The best of the blog.
The best of the blog. This comes from my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, which has had visitors from almost 100 different countries, if you can imagine that. Mongolia. I've had a visitor from Mongolia. Okay.
I'm speechless.
Well, so I guess we'll just start right into the news. Starting with Thursday, July 30th, and this is one from Crane's Chicago Business, which is not related to the person involved in it. Exelon's Quad Cities nuclear plant may be a goner come September. Chris Crane, CEO of the company, which is the largest nuclear plant operator in the country.
That's Exelon.
Exelon. Made clear on a conference call with analysts that he doesn't see a way to keep the money-losing Quad Cities plant open without state law charging Illinois ratepayers more to support nuclear plants.
We've talked about this one before. They got 4 plants that aren't making money.
Yeah.
So they want everybody to pay more money so they can make money.
And one of the things that's interesting about it is they want to charge people who aren't even getting electricity from that plant.
Well,
they want to charge.
That sounds fair, doesn't
yeah,
it?
right. All ratepayers in Illinois. All ratepayers in Illinois.
Okay.
So that's what they want.
Spread the misery, huh?
Spread the misery.
There's a picture of that particular plant, the one at Quad Cities.
Okay.
A fairly good-sized plant.
Yeah. And the other plants, I don't remember all four of the plants, but 2 of the others are, as I recall, Byron and Clinton.
Well, this article says that 3 of its 6 Illinois plants are losing money.
Yeah.
And we talked about that. These are the ones that want to...
Oh, yes. There's one in New York, too.
Well, that's making money.
Oh, it's making money.
We're just talking now. They got 6 Illinois plants, 3 of them, and actually 4, counting this one.
Oh, 3 in addition to this. Oh, wow. Well, they have plants that they're talking, and the Quad Cities plant is one that they're talking about.
They're claiming that they're making money overall on all of their facilities, but these 4 are losing money. And they don't want that to happen. So rather than close them, they want the people of Illinois to support them.
They want people to support them.
Why not?
This is the nuclear industry, which for years and years and years was very proud of the fact that it never got any subsidies. I mean, aside from the fact that the federal government was taking care of their waste for free, and they haven't figured out how to do. And aside from Price-Anderson, which guarantees that they don't need to buy insurance above a certain amount.
They couldn't buy insurance.
Yeah, they couldn't. So they wouldn't be in operation if the federal government wasn't giving them a little bit of a helping hand.
I would think.
Yeah.
I would think.
So they're saying now they actually need a helping hand. They want to be. They want to get money.
Don't blame them for asking. I blame Illinois if it gives it to them.
I suppose. Okay.
Moving from
nuclear to coal. Well, where else would you go? Friday, July 31st. The losses are continuing to mount as more coal companies report their second quarter earnings. Cloud Peak Energy announced a $53 million loss for the quarter on Wednesday, and Arch Coal reported a $168 million loss Thursday. These followed a $1 billion loss Peabody Energy reported on Monday. The losses result largely from competition from natural gas and renewables.
This particular plant is a Arch Coal Company plant in in Wyoming.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Okay, it's at least they're not cutting the mountains off.
No, what they're doing is cutting big holes in the ground instead.
Alpha owns Mexico.
Okay.
That we talked about last week with the mountaintop removal.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And they're losing money too.
Well.
So the days of King Coal are over.
Well, yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
The coal,
it's no longer King Coal.
It's no longer King Coal. And of course, if they're going to keep these plants open, they have to, not only have they got the competition from natural gas and renewables, but they have to take care of their emissions. And I remind...
There's more on that coming up in this show. And it's good news, basically. It's something that's a long time been coming.
Yes.
And looks like it's about here.
Let's see, where did that come from? That came from Wyoming Public Media. Our next item is from Clean Technica. There is an assumption that when supply-demand imbalance incident happens, there will be an automatic response within 5 or 6 seconds from conventional gas, coal, hydro generators to stabilize the power supply. This has been an important talking point in an argument against having too much renewable power. But it turns out the assumption is just wrong.
Well, the headline here says it's jaw-dropping news.
Jaw-dropping.
And there's a guy with his jaw dropped.
I guess.
Now look at him up there.
I saw him,
Okay.
As a matter of fact, looking through articles, I saw this guy's face all over the place. And it was for exactly this article. And the idea that we're not getting the stable power that we thought we were getting.
Well, that's what this article's all about.
Yeah, is all about. And, you know, it's...
Are they lying to us or are they just misinformed?
Well, I think they're misinformed. Yeah. I think they're misinformed.
But in any case, it's not been working the way they have been assuming it's working.
Right.
And they've been turning around saying, well, this is one of the problems with renewables.
Right.
Because it turns out the renewables actually are more likely to perform better
than
the gas-fired
Well,
plants.
they have been performing better in Europe. You know, as Germany has been going more and more to renewables, the power supply has become more and more stable. And that is exactly the reverse of what had been anticipated. Yes.
Yeah. The reality here, and this is a quick takeaway, that the gas-fired power plants built in the U.S. do not operate properly in white-knuckle emergencies. That's their words. But under emergency conditions, they don't perform like they thought they performed.
Right.
And so the whole equation is wrong.
The whole equation is wrong. And by the way, the peaking natural gas plants that are used for that purpose produce power at prices that are extremely high. And by extremely high, I mean 5 to 10 times the cost of power that you'd get from wind or solar.
There, so the utilities are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
But luckily, the times during the day when they need the most power is the times of the day when the sun shines brightest.
Isn't that interesting? Who figured that out, do you suppose?
I don't think anybody figured it out in advance. They looked around and said, holy cow. Only the second word wasn't cow.
Yes. Well, yes.
Well,
okay.
It's fortuitous no matter what's going on.
Well, I think that it was our ancestors, you know, who decided that it was more fun to go out and work during the daytime and stay home at night.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Also from Clean Technica, Europe's offshore wind industry has shattered previous installation records in the first half of 2015, installing 2,342.9 megawatts of electric generation capacity, triple the same time last year. Installations for the first half of 2015 reached 2,342.9 megawatts. Didn't I just say that? Tripling
yes, you did.
Yeah. I think I'm okay. The total for Europe in generating capacity is 10,393.6 megawatts.
These numbers up, you know.
All right, 10,400 megawatts, which means that it was increased by about 2%. Is that right? No, that's not right.
Triple.
I don't know. Numbers don't look good to me.
3,000.
Oh, this is
3 gigawatts versus 10 gigawatts.
Yeah, this is okay. Very good. I'm totally confused. I'm sure all of our viewers are. But, you know, we can escape easily, which is one of the good things about this show.
Well, what they're talking about here is new construction.
New construction.
New construction, and that graph shows how fast the new construction is moving in Europe.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
And they're not spending money on almost anything but wind right now.
Well, this has been one of the things that the coal industry has been very upset about, because a lot of money is being spent on automobiles and no money on buggy whips. You know, oh, I'm sorry, wrong century. A lot of money has been spent on wind and solar and no money on coal. And they're getting into a point where they're not sure what to do about it. And one of the things that's really interesting about this is when that industry declines, it doesn't mean that the price is going to go up because there are fewer coal mines. The users and the producers will both kind of disappear simultaneously. Mm-hmm. There's no tail end of this, you know.
Well, if you are in a little later on in the show when we're going to discuss this again.
Yeah.
They were anticipating a lot of export business, particularly to China.
Yes.
And it isn't happening.
It isn't happening. And the export business to India is not happening. And this has been really destructive to the coal industry.
Yeah, just ask the Australians.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. Okay.
This is an interesting picture coming up.
Picture. Why don't you put the picture on the screen? People are much more interested in that than they are in me.
You, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Saturday, August 1st, from Penn Energy, a Maine company that is developing tidal power and river power systems, says it successfully connected one of its units to the power grid in an Alaskan village. Ocean Renewable Power Company says its 25 kilowatt RivGen power system has been successfully deployed in the remote river village of Ijigig. And you know, I looked up the meaning of and pronunciation of Ijigig, and it turns out it means throat gulping water. And you know, it's interesting to me that there's an English word that means almost exactly the same thing. It's not throat, it's person. That sounds very similar. Chugalug.
Well, that's an old Eskimo word.
I suppose it is. This is
I'm looking at this device up there.
Yeah.
It looks like a lawnmower.
It does.
And I wonder how it works when it's floating on top of the river.
It's not. It doesn't. You got to sink it.
They're towing it into place right now, and they're going to dump it underneath the river. Now, stuff like this would work very well in Connecticut.
If we've got enough current, which I think there is in places.
And a lot of rivers in America.
Yeah.
And so this is another underutilized resource.
Well,
the technology's new.
The figures that I've seen indicate to me that the state of Vermont could possibly at least double or even triple our hydro power generation without constructing any dams at all.
We've talked about that.
Yeah,
and the dams are there.
Yeah,
and people are working on this.
Yes,
but one of the problems is the dams are owned by the Corps of Engineers, and the Corps of Engineers is in Washington, and they move very, very slowly on anything.
Yeah. Not all the dams belong to the Army Corps of Engineers, by the way. There was a
lot of them do.
There was an interesting article in Green Energy Times, which I wrote, by the way.
Oh.
But it was about a house that was for sale that had its own dam.
Yeah. Okay.
And you could, you know, the dam wasn't being used at the time, but the equipment was all there.
Yeah.
And so you could, I think the turbine needed to be replaced, but that was not a huge amount of money, and the thing would just produce, I forget what it was, 12 kilowatts or something. And
right down in Guilford,
by
the post office, there's a little old mill building.
Yeah.
And a dam. And the dam is there.
Yes.
And the sluice is on the back of the dam, so something could be put in there.
Well, and
probably power the post office anyhow.
Yeah, and a lot of these hydro facilities, the dams were put, or the potential hydro facilities, the dams were put in for flood control or something along those lines.
Or some other reason.
And of course, we've had James Perkins in from Little Green Hydro, who's selling hydro plants that go in streams that are intermittent.
Tiny
in
little
many
streams, yeah.
Tiny little streams, but they can produce.
They're not running all the time, but when they're running, you're saving money.
Yeah, and running all the time, not running all the time means there's a couple of months in the summer when they don't run much, but the rest of the year they just go. And if you can get 2 kilowatts of power out of a thing like that, you're talking about 2 kilowatt hours every hour. And you don't have to do anything, and it just means that you're collecting 25 cents or whatever it is every hour, and it does add up.
24/7.
Yeah, exactly.
A little here, a little there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, and you don't have to think about it much. Okay, from Clean Technica, Dr. James J. Powell, director of the National Physical Science Consortium, examined titles and abstracts of more than 24,000 peer-reviewed scientific articles on climate change published during the past couple of years. He identified 69,406 authors named in the articles. Only 4 of them rejected the fact that human emissions cause climate change.
So what he's saying is, if you don't totally buy into it, you automatically reject it, and that's not valid.
Well, not only that, but basically what it comes down to is I think about this, and I think about a mathematician who told me 0.999999 equals 1. It just does.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and how many mathematicians would believe that, and how many mathematicians would reject it? Now, from what I've been told, as weird as that sounds, you can prove that if you've got an infinite number of 9s behind the 0, it's 1. You can prove it mathematically, and yet you're probably going to find some percentage of mathematicians who say no. And that's what these guys are doing. And so basically what we've got here is 4 kooks. Okay. What have you got there on the screen? A big blue ball.
Yeah, it says of 24,000 peer-reviewed articles by 70 authors, I'm rounding the numbers, only 4 authors reject human-caused global warming.
Right.
That's one author in 17, or 0.06%.
In 17,000.
In 17,000, yeah. Well, it's 24,000.
Yeah.
No, okay, it's one author and 17,000.
It's okay. and the slice of the pie that represents is 1/10 as wide as the slice in that blue ball. You don't see the slice there?
Well, it's there, but yeah, it's very.
You can barely.
That's about as small as they could make it, and still be seen.
My bet is there are people who are looking at this and saying, "Slice? What slice?
Where's that slice? Where's that slice in that blue ball?"
It's vertical, coming up from the middle. It goes straight to the top of the ball. It looks like just a line, and that's the people who know about climate professionally and reject the idea of climate change. But of course, there are politicians in this world who happen to be paid by people who don't want climate change to happen because it's not good for their business.
Well, yeah, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There was one guy who said, he wrote one of these articles and he rejected climate change, and he said, I'm really happy that I'm rejecting climate change because if climate change were real, it would be really destructive for Russia. Which it would be.
It would be.
It would be because 2/3 of their exports are oil. And unfortunately, the people who are towing the line of the politicians who pay for them of the supporters who pay for them to be campaigning, are putting the United States behind in a race to get secure power, secure energy, and the advantages that you have from not having to pay for fuel. Yeah. They're putting us behind China, and the only beneficiaries are the fossil fuel industry and Russia. What does it tell you?
Right now, Russia is the boogeyman du jour.
Yeah, well, Russia is the biggest. I think it's the biggest seller of fossil fuels, but it's also certainly 2/3 of its income is coming from sale of fossil fuels, and it's also pushing nuclear.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? Okay, From Clean Technica. Boy, we're getting a lot from Clean Technica.
Good outfit.
Huh?
Good outfit.
Yeah, it is. A report from the University of Georgia says states can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by combining renewable energy resources and energy-saving strategies. Complying with the Clean Power Plan would also produce substantial collateral benefits, such as lower electric bills, by golly, greater gross domestic product growth, and a significant reduction in sulfite and NOx and mercury emissions.
Well, this particular graph illustrates how utility scale PV has been
Put the graph
diminished.
up, Tom.
Oh, I got a little bit of
there you go.
there. I'm looking at the graph here.
Yeah, right.
But it dropped tremendously in the last few years, and it keeps going down.
Yeah, what is it that we're looking at going down?
Utility scale PV.
Ah.
That's the one on the right.
Yeah, okay. Well, the utility scale PV is going to be picking up.
Well, it's showing that commercial scale PV is going down, residential scale is going down, and they just took a closer look at the utility scale, which is the graph on the right. But yeah,
that's the price.
That's the price to build it.
Ah, okay. I thought you were saying the amount being billed.
No, this is the price.
This is the price to build it. So the price of, and you know, this is something that's really interesting that people should consider. We talk about grid parity, and grid parity is the point at which solar power is on parity with coal and natural gas and things like that, and is at equal cost. Well, grid parity is measured in terms of wholesale prices. If you put solar on your roof and you have your own solar, you are comparing, and honestly, the price of the solar on your roof with what you would be paying,
which is retail,
which is not wholesale, it's retail. Yeah. And so we have achieved grid parity long ago in a large part of the United States. If you're comparing solar,
as the individual homeowner,
that's right. That's right. So this is an important thing. But as we speak, there are places in the United States where solar power has hit utility scale grid parity.
Yeah, so, and utilities are buying it.
Yep.
As we will talk about a little bit later.
Yep.
And have talked about in the past.
That's right. So, should we go on to our next thing here?
Well, can't dance, might as well.
Okay. Sustainable Brands gave us this, an unprecedented show of business support for tackling climate change. 365 companies and investor groups sent letters today to more than 24 governors across the United States voicing their support for the EPA's Clean Power Plan for existing power plants and encouraging the state's timely finalization of state implementation plans to meet new standards.
Well, we've got a graph up there. It's a map of the United States.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Vermont's not on it.
Well, isn't that interesting? And you look at it.
But Vermont is doing this. They just haven't written a letter to the governor about it. And that's what this picture is.
Why would people in Vermont write letters to the governor? We're already doing it. We don't need to encourage the governor.
But in the article, they explicitly mention Ben & Jerry's as being one of the companies that's...
Well, Ben & Jerry's is more than just a Vermont company.
But they have a big Vermont presence.
They do indeed. That's right. Both Ben and Jerry. And in fact, the company, Ben & Jerry's. So there we go. That came from Sustainable Brands. Sunday, August 2nd.
I had a takeaway from
Oh,
this.
did you? Good. Let's go to it.
This came from Ceres, who we've talked about
that's
before.
right. Yep.
And they're apparently behind this whole...
Ceres is just one of those organizations that's everywhere.
But what they're saying is the EPA's Clean Power Plan, of which we will be hearing more,
I suppose,
is the nation's first comprehensive effort to reduce carbon pollution from existing electric power plants.
Right.
Not necessarily coal, not necessarily nuclear, not necessarily anything, any particular kind, all of them.
Yeah.
So they're looking at all of them and they're saying you got to reduce your carbon.
Yep.
Which is, in our case, the single largest source of global pollution warming in the country.
Yes.
Global warming pollution
in
the country.
Yes.
And the plan sets unique emissions reduction targets for each state to achieve by 2030. and give states flexibility in how to best achieve their goals.
Right.
So it's an interesting way they're going about it. This
is.
is what you got to do. How you do it is your business.
Right.
But we want to see the results.
Right. Right. Okay. Sunday, August 2nd, from Wicked Local Woburn. Woburn. How do you pronounce that? Woburn.
Depends on what part of Massachusetts you're
I
from.
suppose it does. I had a guy in Massachusetts asking me one day if I wanted a cod. I was trying to figure out, why is he trying to give me a fish? And it turned out he was saying cord.
A cord.
And when he realized that I couldn't understand him, he said, "Would you like a cord?" In this case, it's Woburn. Purpose Energy is a company on a mission, changing the world one beer at a time. Eric Fitch, co-founder and CEO of Purpose Energy, has made a breakthrough in waste remediation, enabling energy and beer brewing. The company's patented Tribrid bioreactor installed at Magic Hat Brewery in South Burlington, Vermont, has changed the game. I talked to this guy.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, and yeah. He explained some of this stuff to me. They can actually
this guy Fitch.
Yeah, in most of the breweries they have their light waste, which basically can go into the local system. It's just it's basically like tea, you know.
Yeah.
But what do you do with all the heavy waste, which includes a huge amount of yeast, and also the spent grain and so forth?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is you put it into this guy's digester,
yep.
And it basically breaks it down, so 99% of it is gone. And what that means is you don't have to truck it off site anymore.
Which is where they're saving all the money.
Yeah, absolutely. They're saving a lot of money by not trucking this stuff off site. And by the way, it's not just the beer industry; it's the wine industry, and it's the dairy industry, because they have a lot, you know, they've got waste from cheese making and stuff like that that has a lot of stuff in it that can be digested.
Looking at this guy, it looks like he just graduated from high school.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
But he's got a good remark here. He's talking about this system they got.
Yep.
The most robust anaerobic system there is. And it's turning waste into cleaner water through what he calls phosphorus sequestration.
Yes.
And biogas that gets fed back to the plant.
Yep.
About 30% of the plant's energy demand is fulfilled by this bioreactor.
Yes.
So to generate heat for the plant and probably electricity.
They're generating electricity.
And then the final one is what you just mentioned. The massive cost that breweries usually inherit from trucking and disposing of waste is nearly eliminated.
Yep.
For Magic Hat, I wouldn't have thought it was this big. The savings is worth well over $100,000 a year.
Well, actually, you know, whenever you're doing things on a large scale, you have things that people don't really think of until they see what's going on. And I remember reading about an area in California where they had problems with carbon dioxide in the air, high carbon dioxide concentrations. And it was all coming from winemaking.
Yeah.
And it was the carbon dioxide that those little yeast cells were generating as they were turning sugars into ethanol. Yeah. And it was enough to affect the entire area. So, you know, this is also something that has to be, when we deal with carbon emissions, we have to deal with more than just the power plant. We've got to deal with all kinds of things.
This is a source you don't think about.
No, you don't think about it.
Yeast burp.
Well, the other thing too, of course, is that it's coming from grapes. The grapes grow annually. It's one of those short cycles where the carbon emissions go into the air and then they come back. And so it's not really. In a way
it's renewable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's renewable in a way, but still, it would be. I mean, if they could capture that carbon dioxide and use it for something, it would help.
There's probably people working on that exactly.
There probably are. Yeah.
If there's a chance to make money on it, you could bet somebody's working on it.
Yes.
Which is
absolutely
nothing to knock. I mean,
absolutely. Okay.
Well, we got a picture of Jerry Brown up here.
We have a picture. Oh, that's me. Oh, no, there's Jerry Brown. From the Sacramento Bee. One opportunity for the governor of California to meet his goal of renewable energy is to partner with other Western states to coordinate electric systems across the West. According to a study by a California ISO, a functional Western grid using the state's renewable requirement would lower pollution levels by nearly 2.6 million metric tons annually.
Now I'm looking at the picture and I'm saying to myself, what's the priest doing there? And
Let me guess.
It turns out on a separate issue, really, but this is where they got the picture from.
Yep.
Jerry and this priest, who I think is Father Hesper from Notre Dame.
Okay.
They went to visit the Pope.
Yeah.
And the Pope had an energy conference.
Yeah.
Which is why they went over there.
Yeah.
Which ties in with this article.
This is the Pope who calls people up if he likes them.
Oh, does he? Oh,
yeah, he does that. He had a I don't remember what it was that spurred it, but there was some kid who was like 17 years old. The phone rang, and he picked it up, and the person at the other end said, "Hello, this is the Pope."
This is the Pope. The guy says, "Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus."
Well, it turned out it actually was the Pope. This is a very interesting
here
Pope.
About what Brown is really doing here.
Yeah.
They have a grid.
Yes.
It's very inefficient.
Yes.
It's outmoded.
Yes.
There's a lot of redundancy.
Yes.
And what he's trying to do is create a more modern version of the grid, incorporating a lot of feedback back and forth that works.
Right.
And it looks, by this article, that it's going to work well.
Yes. And I wonder whether that wind farm they're talking about in Wyoming, actually there's 2 wind farms in Wyoming that they're talking about, and they're both absolutely massive.
Would they be part of this?
I bet they would
probably
be.
would, yep.
Yeah. One of them is they have one group of people who is trying to supply wind for, I think, Los Angeles, and the other one for San Diego, and they're both in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them,
both directly connected. This isn't a what would you say, a bookkeeping thing.
No, this is actual wires,
yeah.
and the one going to San Diego, I think, is the one where they're taking the electricity and they're moving it to Nevada, where they have salt domes. They're using the salt domes to store compressed gas so that the demand can be evened out. The supply and demand can be levelized.
Okay.
So it's a.
And one of the things they're saying here is because the on-off variability of renewable power in one area is balanced by renewables operating at different moments in another area.
That's right.
And
the wind never stops blowing everywhere at once.
Bingo.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're back to nuclear.
Yep.
Atlanta Progressive News tells us Plant Vogtle, which is Vogtle for those people.
It's Vogtle, yeah. We've been through that before.
Proposed nuclear expansion with new units 3 and 4 will cost an estimated $65 billion. This is 2 nuclear reactors costing over $32 billion each to put in.
The picture is Plant Vogtle as it exists now, with only 2 reactors.
Right.
It looks like the 4th one's been canceled. And it looks like right now what we're talking about is the 3rd one may not happen.
Well, this says former Georgia Public Service Commissioner Bobby Baker says this based on his analysis of information he received when cross-examining the PSC staff witness, Public Service Commission staff witness, at the June 23rd, 2015 PSC hearing. The hearing was for the 12th Vogtle Construction Monitoring Review. $65 billion is a lot of money. And they're planning.
I spend that much just before breakfast. No, it's a lot, and they're losing tax credits because they're behind times.
Yeah, this is a disaster. This is just a disaster.
I mean, there's
build it or not build it. Either way, it's a disaster. Yeah. Okay. From CNN, on Monday, August 3rd, The Obama administration unveiled its Clean Power Plan, which aimed at a large reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The president,
we're going to be talking about this for the rest of the show.
Yes, the rest of the year. The president will next begin selling it to the public at a White House event. That's just the beginning of selling it to the public. Nobody is really invited to that event from the public. It was all important people. The Clean Power Plan is the final version of the EPA regulations, which President Barack Obama called the biggest, most important step we've ever taken to combat climate change. And I will tell you, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when this happened, you know, usually one of the searches I do is renewable power, Google search, and I get usually about 250 responses. On weekends, it's far below, but you know, usually it's about 250. The day this happened, I got 475, and that didn't end my day's search.
This is just what's out there for that day.
That's just out there for that day, and it was just that one search. I have other searches I do. This really, it's an important issue in the news. Very, very important.
Well, and George has been overwhelmed, and now we're going to overwhelm you. But this is a big issue.
This is a big issue.
It's a very big issue, and an important one.
And it's important. And as a matter of fact, on one of the days, you know, on the days I put up 10 to 15 items on the geoharvey.wordpress.com site, and on this I also send out emails and put up things at Green Energy Times site, and they have about 5 items each. And on this particular day, the email and the Green Energy Times site both had just 5 items, all of which related to this one news thing, because it was clearly by far the most important thing that happened that day. So, and we're going to be talking about it. I don't know that we have to dwell on this particular report, but I mean, we can just go on. Should we go to the next item?
Well, the next one is sort of, well, it's
the same thing.
To this.
TheDay.com said, the wind and solar industries cheered while coal companies vowed to kill President Obama's new limits on climate change polluting as details of the historic regulations emerged on Sunday. The rules include tougher limits on carbon emissions and more incentives for renewable energy than expected. And it also meant fewer for natural gas. So the changes that they had over the time when this was going through from the time it was first announced and public statements were taken and so forth, the changes that came about made it stricter. They actually...
The public's response.
Yeah.
Basically caused them to tighten the strings.
That's right.
Yeah,
now they had said we need to reduce by 30%. They upped that to 32%. They also said we're not going to make it all that easy for natural gas. But the one thing, the concession that they gave the fossil fuel companies and the states was that they could take 2 years longer.
They gave them a little more time.
Gave them to get their act together and start getting things underway.
I got no problem with that.
You know, it's a tactical thing. It's a matter of how do you close a plant? It's not something that can be done instantly.
No, you don't just turn a switch. Got an interesting picture up here.
Yes.
I went searching for something that had wind and solar in it at the same time.
Oh, good for you.
I came up with a gem.
Oh, look at that.
It's got wind and solar, it's got underwater.
Yeah.
And these are all, well, the wind and solar are real. These others are pretty much concepts that are being explored, but we see 2 different types of underwater turbines over here.
Yes.
Okay. This one's interesting. It's tidal.
You know,
okay? As the tide goes up and down, this thing goes up and down and generates electricity.
Yeah, the orange thing. I don't know that people watching this actually have a view of the cursor. Might be not, so we should refer to these things.
No, they don't. They can't see the cursor, unfortunately.
Yeah. So
I'm looking over here.
The tidal turbines are in the lower right quadrant of that picture. And that one thing kind of looks like a storage tank underwater or something, but who knows?
That thing looks like a cigar?
Yeah, sort of.
We've seen something like that before. It's looking to recover energy from waves.
Yeah.
Not from tides, but from the recurring action of the waves.
Right, right. And
it's like a big snake.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on in there, and but they're starting to install these things.
Oh yeah, every one of these things somewhere is being installed as a pilot plant.
Right.
Some of them are going to hit pay dirt.
Some of them are going to hit pay dirt, and
this is only a brief look at all of the stuff that's out there.
Right.
We just saw that lawnmower-looking thing.
Yes, the Alaskan lawnmower.
We've seen that before.
River lawnmower.
And we're going to see it again.
Oh yeah.
Looks like it's going to start.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen other versions of the same sort of design. Okay, should we go on, or do you want to?
Well,
gloat over that for a while.
I don't think I had anything really.
Okay.
I don't have any real takeaways out of that. So
all right.
Let's move on to the next one.
All right. From Renew Economy, in an opinion piece, the most recent head. This really kind of got me. The most recent head of the National Australia Bank made revelations about the backlash from government to business that dared speak out in support of sensible climate change and renewable energy policies. Cameron Klein lamented the government's economically reckless policies, willful ignorance, and retributions for those who did speak out.
Repeat that last sentence.
All right, Cameron Klein lamented...
Just the retribution part.
Right. The government's economic reckless policies, willful ignorance, and retribution against those who spoke out. And
the backstory is that they're smashing this guy. This particular guy's getting a lot of heat.
He got a lot of heat. And it was back in like 2007. He said something about this. Not under the previous government, but under the government before that, which was a liberal government. The current government is a liberal government. Liberal in this sense, liberal in this sense means liberal in Australia means basically super right wing Republican Tea Party nut, but not green, and what they mean is, by liberal, the government will stay out of your business, and basically, and you know, they had a situation where renewable energy was getting subsidies. The government that just got in a little over a year ago, the renewable energy was getting subsidies. They wanted to cut the subsidies in order to help the coal industry, and at one point they were actually talking about taking the subsidies from renewables and giving them to the coal.
Don't blame them for asking, but if they get it, it's kind of
well. I think there's a little bit of a question of who is in whose pocket here. So anyway, that was Cameron Klein, and National Australia Bank is not an insignificant bank. It's one of the biggest banks in the country, and he was saying we need to do something about this. And they were, according to the article, they actually had people calling him.
Yeah, I read about it. I mean, he was really getting a lot of abuse.
He was getting abuse at home in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And that's not nice.
No, I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Well, the next one we're going to talk about, and I'm only going to mention the title here because for some crazy reason it's not on the screen. EPA's carbon rules are catching up with the market. That's
what the title is. This is August 4th, Tuesday. The president rolled out Monday the much-anticipated centerpiece to his climate change plan. It envisions an overhaul in power plants, what they burn, and the broader electric system. It's ambitious, but to people in and around the power sector, this revolution is already well underway, not because of the EPA, but because of the market.
That's an interesting point. It's a very interesting point.
Yeah, and I think this is important for people to understand. The coal industry is at the end of its life, not because we're running out of coal, not actually even because of the pollution problems.
No,
it's running out of life.
No longer profitable.
Because we've got cheaper ways to do things. And natural gas is going to be running out of its life, if not this year, then the next or the year after that, sometime in the very near future, because the price of power from wind, from solar, and from other sources of renewable energy, the price of power from those sources has hit
Well, there's a sentence here that summarizes that.
Go for it.
One big ingredient in what's happening here is cheap renewable power.
Right.
The EPA Clean Power Regulation envisions solar, wind, and other renewables will make up 28% of the electricity supply in 2030. I think it's going to be more than that.
Oh, I think it's going to be much more than that.
Solar energy, for one, has dropped dramatically in price, which we know.
We know.
There's a sentence here, we've already talked about this. In Nevada, one utility owned by Warren Buffett.
Yeah, who is that?
He knows what he's doing, doesn't he?
Doesn't
Buys solar power for under 4 cents a kilowatt.
Under 4 cents a kilowatt hour.
It should be a kilowatt hour. This thing says a kilowatt.
Well, your reporters never know anything.
That may be the cheapest
why I went
electricity in
into
America.
journalism is because reporters, you don't have to know anything to be a reporter. You're allowed to say the most outrageous things, and people pay you to say them. But if you're going to be careful, then you're valued higher. Actually, I shouldn't admit that because I get about the lowest pay you can get. But yeah, 4 cents per kilowatt hour is not a price that natural gas meets.
Not at all. No, they're not much higher than that, but they are higher.
They are higher. They're up around.
Their best price is about 5.5 or 5.8.
Best price, yeah, and their average prices are about 6.5. Yeah. And we're getting to a point where solar unsubsidized would beat them, and that's conventional natural gas plants, not peaking plants.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Because the peaking plants, you're talking about prices that are 5 times that.
They're disappearing fast because solar's coming online and wind's coming online,
that's
and
right.
it's making these things unprofitable.
Yep, and that's just what's going to happen. I'm afraid. I'm not afraid. I believe.
A little bit more on this particular item, a different slant on it. EPA's Clean Power Plant is tougher than expected.
True enough.
I'll bring that picture up there.
This is from oilprice.com. The Obama administration has unveiled its clean power plan. We've already heard that 3 times. The first of their kind limits on carbon pollution from existing power plants will require slightly tougher cuts than the original proposal. The EPA is calling for a 32% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from power plants below 2005 levels by 2030. That is an increase from 30% target, which is the part of the original proposal. And this might be a good time to explain to people why some of the background of why this all came about.
Yeah, you were talking about that. I didn't even know this. It's not in the article.
It's not in the article. It's not in many of these articles. But a year or 2 ago, the federal government, the EPA, was involved in a lawsuit that the courts, and I believe this was the Supreme Court, decided may put them into a position where they had to regulate carbon emissions.
So before they had to, they're doing it voluntarily.
Well, no, they were told by the court, you have to do this.
To do it. So you have to. Result of the court.
You have to do something about this.
Okay.
And so the question of is it constitutional or is it legal, or why didn't Congress get involved? We need an act of Congress to do this. Well, I got news for you. Congress was involved.
Yeah.
And Congress passed a law which produced a ripple effect that resulted in this. And there wasn't much in the way of choices that the EPA had. They had to do something.
Well,
at least that's my understanding.
Article, one quick sentence. In any case, the trajectory is clear.
Yes.
Coal will cede, CEDE.
Yes.
Coal will cede its market to renewables over the coming years.
Yes.
And there's probably not much that can stop that from happening.
Well, there are other things that you could consider about this. For example, coal has already seen its share of the electric market taken by its position in the electric market taken by natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which is only going to last a short period of time.
Yeah. So far this year, 78% of new electric capacity installed has been renewable.
Yeah.
And the other 22% has been natural gas.
Natural gas.
And in fact, in June, natural gas only accounted for 2%. Now, these figures are up from last year, where we saw about 50% from natural gas. And so their new additions in capacity are declining rapidly, and we don't hear about that much in the news.
Well, one of the things that happened, I think, is when the fracking or the fracked natural gas hit the market.
Mm-hmm.
The investors were looking at this and saying, "Boy, this is a windfall. It's going to last a long time. We're going to make a lot of money."
Yeah, well, the numbers turned out to be wrong.
Happening.
Yeah,
these gas finds are petering out much quicker than they thought.
Right.
I think we talked about one in California that petered out so fast
Marcellus,
they didn't even get to the market.
Yeah, the Marcellus play, and this was going to be able to produce all the gas we needed for decades. And as it turned out,
about 3 years.
Yeah, they started pumping, and they realized that it only had about 6%. I think
it's a very low number
of the amount of gas that they thought it had. And when you get into a situation like that, you start saying, does it make any sense to put a well down at all? And if you look,
these are expensive wells. So
yeah, they are.
This is not just drilling a hole. These things go sideways.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but they go.
They drill down and then they drill sideways. And then they pump a whole bunch of stuff under there to fracture rocks so the gas will come in, and that works for a while.
What happened in the one in California, I believe, was they thought they had everything settled the way they fracked the gas, and the gas would come out and they'd suck it up and sell it. But instead, the process of fracking was driving the gas somewhere else. So it's still down there, but they can't get at it.
You can't
maybe
always
someone
win.
will figure another way to get it out, and we'll go through this cycle all over again.
If you go online, and I forget where this is, so it would take people a bit of investigation, but I've seen these figures. You can actually find the amount of gas that's being produced at the various gas plays in the United States. And if you look at those, you find that one of them is producing well, and 2 others or 3 others are producing sort of okay, and the rest are just losing.
The rest are losing.
Yeah.
And they're borrowing money, which has to be paid back.
Well, is it going to be paid back?
Well, somebody's going to pay it back. Either they will or the banks will.
The banks.
But somebody's going to lose money
when
on that deal.
When you buy into the Larry Moe and Curly natural gas company, you can bet. You know
Never
who's
heard of that company.
Larry Moe and Curly. Okay, should we go ahead?
Yeah,
Charging ahead. One of the rich tech companies in the U.S. will soon power its 5 Texas data centers with 100% renewable energy.
I think we missed one.
Missed one?
Yeah, natural gas takes a backseat to renewables.
Ah, oh my goodness gracious. So we did.
The Obama administration unveiled.
I actually got, natural gas intelligence. Sorry, I jumped too ahead. The Obama administration unveiled its version of the natural gas plan on Monday. You know, the problem that I've got with this is I've got all these articles that start out the same way. Establishing for the first time federal limits on carbon emissions for the natural power plant, for the nation's power plants. But apparently, through the embrace of renewables, solar, wind, and wind power, rather than natural gas, coal, of course, took the greatest beating, but supporters of natural gas power were also not happy. And this is part of the problem, is that if you're going to reduce carbon emissions, that means that you have to stop people from burning fossil fuels, and natural gas is a fossil fuel. And as a matter of fact, interestingly enough, the Obama administration simultaneously came up with this thing that said, and this is not one of our articles, said biomass under certain circumstances is as bad as coal.
Technically, he's right.
Well,
it's the matter.
Yeah, what he's talking about is this thing that's happening in the United States where we're having forests clear cut, and then pelletized, put into ships, and shipped to Germany or something. And the problem with that, of course, is you're taking a huge carbon sink every time you cut down a tree. Even if you plant a new tree, you're taking down a huge carbon sink and replacing it with a tiny carbon sink, and it's not equivalent. So if we're going to reduce the carbon emissions during the 21st century, we've got to think about that kind of thing.
Now, biomass, if it's done properly, is quite green.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to make a quick buck, you're not going to do it properly.
Well, I was involved in this email thing that went through that, and Andrew Perchlik, who is I forgot what his title is, but he works in the state of Vermont, and he's involved in such things, wrote and said that as far as the state of Vermont is concerned, if the forests are stewarded, if the biomass is burned properly, which in my opinion means gasification, or biodigestion, where you're producing a gas and then that is being used, it's renewable. But it's got to be local. It's absolutely got to be local, because when you start picking this stuff up and pelletizing it and shipping it around the world, that's
costing you money.
Absolutely. We should charge ahead.
To the next one.
The National Renewable Energy Laboratory released data showing that the capacity factor for wind power can reach 65%. Imagine that, which is close to that of fossil fuel-based generation.
Well, what they're saying here is that the newer iteration of wind turbines is so much more efficient.
Yep.
For one thing, because they're bigger, they're taller, and there's more wind up there.
Yes.
And they're running from 20% and aiming for 60%
right.
of utilization.
Right. And that means that these wind turbines the average turbine will be running almost all the time, producing some amount of power. And
so at least as much as the conventional plants. Yeah,
this is in Clean Technica. The next item comes from Green Biz, one of the largest tech companies in the United States, will power its 5 Texas data centers with 100% renewable power. This is Hewlett Packard. They recently announced a 12-year contract to buy 112 megawatts of wind power from Sun Edison. And it means that Hewlett Packard will reach its 2020 operational greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal 5 years ahead of schedule.
You're doing okay.
They are. Our next item, Alpha Natural Resources, once a powerhouse of the American coal industry, filed for bankruptcy protection under Chapter 11 to get relief from its $3 billion debt, particularly with utilities switching to natural gas and coal prices continuing to move south. It borrowed heavily to acquire assets, coal mines, it hoped would increase in value as China's coal use continued to grow.
A strategy that failed.
Yeah, boy, did it. And that was from Market Business. And finally, Power Magazine. Ameren, Missouri has dropped plans to build a second nuclear power unit at its Callaway Energy Center, citing shaky economics in the context of cheaper renewables, low demand, and other factors for its decision. During an earnings call, the CEO said the company is moving to a, quote, cleaner and more diverse generation portfolio, end quote, such as a new 13-megawatt solar facility west of St. Louis. And that's the second item we've had in just 1 week about nuclear plants, one of which was not going to come online, and the other was very likely going to be closed.
And this one is not going to happen.
Yeah. So there we have the week.
And we got about 3 minutes left.
No, we don't, because we've got to have our credits time. So I think we could probably just wrap it up here. Have you got any special observation that everybody should know about, Tom?
Not that I haven't talked about already.
We've talked about everything.
Keep your eyes on this Obama thing, because that's going to be big.
It's going to be big, and in my opinion, and of course I'm not a legal expert on a thing like this, but having seen a lot of stuff behind this, I think this is, the leadership in Washington, which is advising states not to generate their plans, you know, McConnell's doing that. The problem that you've got with that is that means that if the courts turn against you, which I think they will, then the state is going to have its plan imposed on it by the federal government.
They don't want that.
You can plan for it and fight it at the same time.
Yeah.
But not planning for it is like, it's kind of like saying, no kid, don't buy insurance on your car.
Yeah. Yep.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again next week. I am George Harvey, and this is Tom Fennell.
Have a good weekend.
Have a nice week.
Or whatever.
Or whatever.
See it at different
Have
times,
a good party. See you later. And makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.